שמע שיר חדש
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm going to dedicate this shiur to certain cholim, and also especially to those who are unfortunately victims of the missiles terror from Iran, which got us all into our various shelters this morning. So they should have full and speedy recovery, and Bez Hashem, we should see no more missiles, and we should see a real peace throughout the land. Well, last week I shared with you something from the Megillah Esther about the date that was arriving with this past Thursday, which was the 23rd of Sivan, as the day in which the Megillah tells us the following story. Okay, what happened was that Esther said as follows. So Tomer, Imal Melech Tov, V'matzasi Chein Lefanov, if you have pleasure for me, if you have a good feeling about me, V'kasher HaDavar, and if it's a good idea, in other words, you endorse this concept, and also V'tov Ani Be'einav, and I'm good and righteous in your eyes, maybe also beautiful in your eyes. And it says, let a decree be written to countermand those dispatches devised by Haman Hagagi. We want to turn back the decree of the king. A decision had to be made. The king, Achashverosh, had to make a choice. Who would he favor? Would he go to the side of the Yehudim, the Jews, particularly Esther and Mordechai, or would he favor Haman? That was the choice that was presented in the Megillah Esther, and this is what happened. He responded as follows: Atem kitfu al Yehudim katov beinechem. You can write about the Jews whatever you want. I'm going to stay a little bit neutral. In other words, I'll endorse everything you say about the Jews. However, and it can be sealed in my seal with the kingly approval, because the other letters that were sent out, B'Shem HaMelech, Ein Lahashiv, I cannot take them away. So he actually played a middle ground. He said, I'm not going to be mevatel completely the words of Haman, but about the Jews should be ready for extermination on the 13th of Adar. This was being discussed in the time period between the second day of Pesach, when Haman was hanged, and the 23rd of Sivan, second day of Pesach being 16 of Nisan, the day that the Omer begins to fall. We also count Sviras HaOmer towards Shavuos holiday. It's a big day. It's a big day. And I can't touch the Svarim that already went out. You might think of it as an analogy, interesting thing, like what Svarim are we talking about? Agreements. There are agreements. There have been, how shall I say, heskemim. I can't violate that agreement, but I will allow you to write what you want for the Jews. Now, this conversation was delayed all the way to the 23rd of Sivan, and on that day, Vayikaru Sofrei HaMelech, Ba'es Hahi, at that specific day, B'chodesh HaShlishi, Hu Chodesh Sivan, this was this past Thursday, Shlosha ve'Esther miyom bo, on the 23rd, Vayikasev kekol asher tziva Mordechai al Yehudim. Here, there were two different declarers. The first set of letters, which was sent out by Haman right before Pesach, okay, and actually was publicized immediately before the Chag, was a letter about the Jews from Haman for their extermination. And now here's a counter letter from the Jews, but it says that it's coming from Mordechai. Asher tziva Mordechai. Notice not Esther particularly, but Mordechai. And it went out, okay, now, including to the Jews in their unique language of Lashon Kodesh, Kamuvan, V'yichtov b'shem hamelech Achashverosh v'yachtom b'tabat hamelech. So it was written not in the name of Mordechai, but in the name of the king. Vayishlach Svarim biyad haratzim. They sent it out quickly. You know, you can't even send a parcel to Israel now. No, not so easily, you know, because the airports are shut. You want to send UPS, you want to send FedEx. I'm looking into. I need something sent to me. You know, you don't have. But here the FedEx went out. Asher nasan hamelech liYehudim. Mordechai doesn't take credit. He gives the credit to Achashverosh in his name. Asher bechol ir ve'ir, on every city, likael v'lamod al-nachsham, lahashmi, laharug, la'abed, not the Jews, but as kol chel am b'nah hatzarin osam. Now, listen to this. It's not just individuals. It's called chel am u'medina hatzarim osam. This means armies. That means there are certain hostile states and territories to the Jewish people. Listen to the words. Kol chel am umedina. Not the bunch of lowlife, anti-Semite, protesters or free press. Free from wisdom, that is. Hatzarim osam, that speak ill of the Jewish people. No, we're talking here nations. And guess what? It's not only the adults. Taf v'nashim ushlalam babos. This is very important. Why is it that they wanted to, the command was the Jews destroy women and children? All right? This is like the command to destroy Amalek. Any of those people, any of those nations have associated themselves with Amalek, and we apply the din of the war of Amalek as explicated in the book of Kings by the Rambam, based on Sefer Dvarim, that the king is commanded to lead a Melchemes Amalek, and that has to be the total nation, and the money. Now, so question number one is, we had this unusual episode of Trump on the 23rd of Sivan. I want to analyze that, but from the context of the Megillah, and to decipher what's next. What else can we decipher from the Megillah about what might happen next? Yes, we know that after declaring falsely, actually, that he was giving Iran 2 weeks, precisely on the 23rd of Sivan, that decree went out, that announcement was made, so it was a fake. But the reality was, in the inner sanctum, the fate was already sealed. You know, because Baruch Hu was working with his way of influence on erstwhile the modern day Achashverosh, who is Trump, who goes this way, that way, multiple wives, not exactly coherent in all of his choices, but somehow he can flip on a dime, but at the same time, he does eventually support Mordechai and Esther, and his child with Esther becomes the righteous king, Daryavesh, who fulfills what the ancestor started. Now, this is very, very significant. Who was the ancestor of Achashverosh? The great first kings. Yeah, okay. So we have the first kings of Persia, right, that defeated the Babylonians. Okay. One of them was Koresh. He was actually the second in line. He took over almost immediately from the original Daryavesh. It was first Media. It was Media, Persia. So Media is kind of in between Iran and a little bit Iraq. But the point being that Koresh, Cyrus the Great, the ancestor and father of the Persian Empire, it was his seed that would declare the return of the Jewish people, but only because it came under the influence of Mordechai and Esther. They were able to redirect to the good what Koresh had declared, that he saw himself as the emissary of the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so just for a little context, where am I going with this? What do I want to show you? What do I want to point out? I'm looking for information in the Megillah and in some of the Gemorros that we've been reading lately, including the Daf Hayomi, for information that might be able to give us background, expansive thought. What might Hashem be communicating to us? Because there are no coincidences, especially far-fetched ones, like which page of Daf Yomi you're reading that day, or which section of the Parsha you're reading in that day. And I mentioned in the last year that the day that the original Israeli attack of Rising Lion, Am Kalavi, that was, as we said, the two psukim of Vayehi bin Soa Aaron, Vayom and Moshe, Kuma Hashem vayafutz oivecha. Hashem, rise and scatter your enemies. Right? Vayenusu misanechem panecha. Let flee the ones that are hating us, that want to do away with us, plotting against us. So how appropriate was that? That was, right, spot on. But even more so, that on the 23rd of Sivan, we see a remez from the Megillah Esther itself that a decision would be made, a declaration would be made. The letters weren't read on that day necessarily, only by the closest places, but they got eventually to all the Jewish communities. But what were the Jewish communities asked to do? To wait until the following Adar and then execute the plan of Mordechai, which was to destroy every state army that was anti-Israel. Now you could look at the list. Unfortunately, the list is bigger. You could put the whole United Nations pretty much, some to whatever degree. And there are very few that favor Israel. I know maybe Micronesia will come to our help. I think Tuvalu, a little island in the Pacific, they're like pro-Israel. Micronesia, I don't know much beyond that. It's not really a lot. Maybe some in New Zealand. New Zealand's a pathetically anti-Semitic place, but there are a special tribe there that are very pro-Israel. In any case, it's almost like every Medina. I hope the Jews didn't have to confront that. It didn't seem like it was. Why? Because once Mordechai gained influence back around Pesach time, by the time they get to almost a year later, Nadar, everybody's backing off the Jews. Okay, it's like back off. Okay, fine. We're not gonna antagonize. At least we'll be neutral. So we have a second piece of information that what was declared by President Trump, and we spoke about this last time, on that very self-same day was consistent with the idea that's expressed in the Megillah. Notice Mordechai, that's the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin Netanyahu is a Benjaminite. He's associated with the name Benjamin, Kipshuta. The Benjaminites prevail, but only in the name of Hamelech Achashverosh. So Trump gets the big kudos, and he gets to bomb Fordo. But the reality is that Mordechai was calling the shots all the way. Israel prepared the Derech HaMelech, the King's Highway, for those bombers to come. And we don't even know really how effective those bombers were. No matter what Trump says, we really don't know. We remain in a suffix as to whether or not there will be complete victory over the Iranians. Now, that would constitute regime change. So here's the analogy. If you recall, the tribe of Benjamin, which Mordechai and Esther developed from, had a king, the first king Shaul, who was tasked to fight Amalek of the day. He failed, unfortunately, because he was influenced by people around him to leave King Agag alive. And because of that, he was able to produce a child, seed, im Zera HaYehudim, Zera Esav Amalek. And we ended up many generations later, of course, hundreds and hundreds of years later, with the problems of his descendant Haman HaAgagi, who descends from the king Agag of the battle with Shaul HaMelech. Now, Shaul allowed Agag to live, and he also allowed a lot of the property and the cattle, the commerce, he allowed it to live. In other words, they didn't do a complete destruction. Notice the analogy today. Khomeini is still alive. Last week I told you that I was concerned that this war was just a beginning, because at best Shaul weakened Amalek tremendously and pretty much destroyed its capabilities. But if you think that the Persians today are associated with King Agag's descendants, then we know an interesting analogy and an irony, and it's really an irony, that he's still alive. Khomeiни's still alive, which represents the regime. Now you understand retroactively why it was so important that Agag be killed. Because what Shaul didn't do was take out the regime. As long as there's a king who's recognized as a king of a people, even if it's 10 people, but if they all call him king, and then he's a king, all right? And if that's the case, the regime wasn't changed. And certainly it has not as yet changed. So this is a great step forward. It's exactly spot on to what the Megillah Esther would say. However, just like in the Megillah, the story is not over. This story is far from over. So what can we understand from the texts available to us that we are studying, that we are asked by Hashem and Chazal to study right now? What can we derive from there? What we can learn from there? Like the Lubavitch Rebbe used to say, I like to quote Friedrich Rebbe used to say, "What are you doing, Rebbe?" "I'm reading the newspaper." He says, "What do you mean? Rebbe's reading the newspaper? Great tzaddik." "No, I'm reading the Parshas HaShavua. I'm reading the relevant texts." And in my personal opinion, ever since Daf Yomi started and has gained so much traction around the world, it's almost been incorporated as part, I would call it almost a mandatory sort of limud for anybody who values Torah learning. So therefore, it's almost part of the liturgy. You go to shul, this is like the routine. You go to shul, you daven, especially if you're on old timers, and then you go to the Daf Yomi shir, or before davening, or after davening, or some people later in the day with chavrusas, v'chula, and all kinds of shiurim and videos. But it's what Klal Yisrael does. To that end, it's fascinating that the day of the 23rd, this past Thursday, we began a new Masechta called Avodah Zarah, which outlines the following story. And I'll go through it very quickly with you because you can reference it yourselves. It says that in the end of days, Hashem will hold the Sefer Torah on his chik, on his lap, and say, whoever was osek, whoever was busied himself with this, I will reward them. And it's very, very important to analyze that text. So I'm going to get to that text momentarily. But first, let's just recap where we're up to. We were looking for the 23rd of Sivan to be a significant day. It was. Even though Trump announced it was a subterfuge, that he's not going to do anything for 2 weeks, the reality is he did something right away. And that was really, really echoing the Megillah Esther very much. But even more so in the fact that it was unfinished business, because there was no call for regime change. So far, all that Achashverosh of our day has declared is that kind of like what Achashverosh said. I'm not going to mimevatel the words of the other Medinos that hate the Jewish people, but I will support the Jewish people to battle against them. Same idea here. Let Israel fight Iran. I'm not saying one thing. I'm not trying to change the regime in Iran, and I'm certainly not trying to change the regime in Israel, and I basically support Israel, but you know what? This is their fight to wage, and that's exactly what happened in the Megillah. It was the Jewish battle to fight nations on behalf of all the nations. It's an unbelievable thing. On behalf of the king of all the nations. This is precisely what played out. But just like in the Megillah, there was more to come. So too, I believe right now there's more to come. And so just before we get to the Gemorrah and Avodah Zarah, let's just recap a little bit in the Megillah what happens next. So as the Jews were given this job to do, how did it work out? So the letters arrive, and it said, Pashegan Asav, Linasim, Medina, Medina, everybody found out about this across the world. Galui lechol ha'amim. Leos v'leos ha'yehudim atidim layom hazeh. You're going to have the haters versus the Jews. Lihinakem mi'ovehem, that they will be able to take vengeance. And the words go out, Behulim and Tchufim, they went FedEx, and Mordechai emerges crowned. It's a great success for Mordechai. Mordechai yatzam mifnei hamelech b'levush malchus. King Saul reborn. King Saul reborn in. There's a rejuvenation of Shaul HaMelech. They've come to finish the job that Shaul HaMelech didn't do. Shaul was not able to finish off Agag and the possessions of Amalek completely, because they took some with them. Okay, that meant that there was a spiritual awakening, because Ora is reference to Torah. Chazal tell us Simcha is Yom Tov, Sason is there's Mila, and also Bris Mila, Bikar. So all of those things represented a binding with Hashem. Arba Simcha v'Sason, Zumila, Yikar. And then what happened? B'chol Medina, b'chol Ir, makom asher dvar melech v'daso magia, Sason v'Simcha Yehudim, Mishte v'Yamta for Rabbi Mamei Arts. Wait a minute. What are you so happy about? You got a whole year and you got to stand up in front of all the nations. What are you so happy about? What are you celebrating? It's a premature celebration. You could first beat them like you will do on the 13th of Adar, and then celebrate. No, they're celebrating already. Ki nafal pachad haYehudim aleihem. Something had dramatically shifted. There was a newfound respect and fear of the Jewish people. We've seen a little bit of that. Israel's, with the help of Hashem, as even President Trump acknowledged, that the power of the Jewish people, that people are a little bit scared. That already was a turning point. So if they weren't scared to take out their number one enemy in Agag and his henchmen and family, Kal v'chomer, they're going to take out the lower ones. In other words, I'll give you the parallel to that. If you can take out Iran, you can take out their proxies. You can take out Hamas and Hezbollah and so on. They're proxies. There are so many countries that share that idea. However, it's far from over. So, bottom line is what we can derive from the Megillah itself is that this is going to take some time. So don't despair if there's still rockets coming, and don't get all bent out of shape, because this is a process. We've taken a major step forward. It was a turning point, a tremendous turning point. The death of Haman is analogous to what has happened in the last year or two, and I'd love to have a Shiurim Mitzvah Hashem to go through each and every detail. I did that once, but I need to update it. Each and every person that Israel, each and every one of the Aseres B'nai Haman plus that were taken out, going all the way back to Suleimani and Reisi, and then the head of Hezbollah, and then the head of Hamas. All these were the Aseres B'nai Haman picked off one at a time. Okay, so they've been under attack and being diminished. B'chol Medina. Okay, but it's a process. It's definitely a process. There has not been the death of Khomeini, and more importantly, we could put another Khomeini there in 10 seconds. They have a million of them. The point is the Malchus of Paras has not been destroyed, of Iran has not been destroyed. That Malchus Harisha of Paras, which doesn't necessarily represent the people of Paras. I mean, Koresh was a great king. He was a great friend to the Jewish people. And all of a sudden came Haman and Achashverosh and hijacked the Roman Empire. That's what's happened here. It's been hijacked. The minute we get rid of the hijackers and we can transform Achashverosh into Dayavesh, son of Esther, then, actually they could become great sponsors and great heroes. But that remains to be seen. So we have the parallel Yes, on the 23rd of Sivan, there was declarations. The tide definitely turned when the attacks came, days after. But we have a far larger war ahead of us, and we still have to witness and see. I'll give you the analogy. Paro suffered Eser Makos. So the Mishnah in the fifth parak of Pirkei Avos says, Asara Makas Hevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Mitzrim b'Mitzrayim, v'Asara al Hayam. There were 10 Makos in Mitzrayim, but an additional 10, and then in the Megillah it gets multiplied by hundreds. In other words, it becomes not 10 at the Yam, but 50, 200, 250. The real delivery of the blow, the fatal blow, was not Makas Bechoros even. It was Kriyas Yamsuf. And then from Kriyas Yamsuf, where do the Jews go? They go to the journey towards Har Sinai and we makabel the Torah. This is the I should say the outer structure that we're seeing here is, okay, the period of the Makos may be done. I don't know if you feel that way, but in the Megillah, you dip your finger about the Makos, you feel a little bit bad, or maybe you feel a little bit vindicated. They're two different Perushim. But we dip our fingers for 3 more words. Dam, ve'esh, ve'timros ha'ash. And when looking at these billowing aftermath of all the Israeli attacks and now the American attacks, looks to me like these are part of the Makos. Dam, ve'esh, ve'timros ha'ashan. Iran has gotten the Makos. If they are the successors, the eschatological successors of Golut Mitzrayim, and every generation, in other words, all of 4 Golios ultimately have the Shoresh Mitzrayim, which has its Shoresh in Bilam HaRasha, which has its Shoresh in the Satan Ba'atzmo, and Amalek is just, how should I say, I hate to use this analogy, but Lahavdil Fadolas, he's the Darth Vader of the big emperor. He's the one that executes evil, but Amalek is the one who literally executes the Jewish people, which is why it's interesting to note the shooting at civilians. What are they, crazy? Why would they do something that's such a blatant war crime? And the answer is they have no satisfaction in just preventing Israel from harming them. That's not what they're in the game for. This is unbelievable. They want Jewish blood. They want to see Jewish blood spilled, much like Hitler Yamach Shemo. Kill the Jews. Kill the Jews. I'm not happy that they should be exiled or exported to a different country. That's not enough. He wanted a final solution. Every drop of Jewish blood should spill, even if it's only a quarter Jewish. Let it spill. And that's why they attack. They will always attack civilians, because their taiva is not for self-defense. No, they're willing to get blown to smithereens. They don't care. That's the meat of Amalek. Self-destruction is perfect for them. Because just like Amalek jumped into the burning bath, they don't care if they get burned. They're going to have a much better time up there. That's their religion, right? But the point is that they're willing to damage themselves to the hilt in order to see the Jewish people's blood spilled, and they've not reached their objective of union with Hashem, more importantly, union with the whole of Eretz Yisrael. Try to take away Eretz Yisrael. That's what Haman did too. Haman sent letters to Achashverosh saying, don't build the Beis HaMikdash. So what? Koresh said what he said. We're going to stop it. And that's, of course, very, very extremely powerful to take. But I want to take one more piece from Megillah, and then we'll go to the Gemorrah in Rejuvenation. And then a little bit to Parsha, assuming I have time. Yeah. So there was a line that's very, very telling. And it needs analysis and application here. When Haman realized that he couldn't handle that Mordechai was alive, even though he had been invited to the feast with Esther and he was so favored, he wants to make the tree for Haman. And instead, he's told by the king after a sleepless night, go take Mordechai, parade him around the city and say, Kacha, this is the way the king favors Mordechai over you. That's exactly what happened. Hashem favors Mordechai. Now Mordechai's got the upper hand, literally. So when he comes home, his wife Zeresh, who is Arura, who is a cursed one, said to him, if Mordechai, right, Imizera HaYehudim, Mordechai, if he's from the Jewish seed, what? You didn't know he's Jewish? Atachilosa. You began, you limpol lefanov, lo tuchalo, kinafol tipol lefanov, which means if he's Jewish, if he's from the seed of the Jewish people, you cannot beat him, but you will undoubtedly fall, and I'll say fall again. While they were, you just fell now, you're going to fall more. He says, while they were still, okay, he will undoubtedly fall before him. Nafol tipol. Let me just look at the phrases here. Keywords. Napol tipol. Why the double? You'll fall. Why double? And what is the question of imizera haYehudim? And then there's two more words. Hachilosa, which is familiar from the prayers of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he davened to go where? To go to Eretz Yisrael. To take away the blockages from Eretz Yisrael, blockages that Haman himself made. It's starting to fall away. Lo tuchalo. This is lo tuchalo is the same thing that we said about Yaakov Avinu, that the Malach of Esav, who is representing arch evil, which represents the shluchim of the Satan in every form, and particularly Amalek, that flavor of Esav. It says Kisarisa. We got the name Yisroel because Kisarisa im Elokim va'anoshim va'tuchal. You were able to fight with kings and individuals. Esav and Lavan with the individuals, but more importantly, he was able to subdue the Malach of Esav until he received his blessing. Well, that's very, very significant. So the symbolism, there's one more piece of information here. Imizera Yehudim, of course he's Jewish. The whole everything was predicated that Mordechai, who was from the Jewish people, was the target, and his whole nation, of Haman's ire. So how could Zerah say to him these words? It's absurd. Imizera Yehudim, if he's Jewish. So listen carefully. This is Gemorrah Megillah. And the Gemorrah Megillah says about this pasuk, okay? Zerah Yehudim can be understood as which part of the Jewish people is he from? Is he descendant from the tribes of the descent of Mother Rachel, Rachel's, or Leah's side? So Zerah Yehudim is a reference to Yosef, Yosef and Binyamin, the children of Rachel Imenu. Zeresh was not a fool. Neither was Haman. What they didn't know, because Esther had hidden it from everybody, was that she descended from the tribes of the children of Rachel, Yosef and Binyamin, who together have the power to negate Esav, much more than Yehuda. So, imizera ha-Yehudim, but not all the Yehudim. He said this unique, they called Zera ha-Yehudim, the power of the Jews. The power of the Jews is Mashiach ben Yosef. The power of the Jews is Yosef, whose mother Rachel can defeat Amalek. Binyamin, King Shaul, was tasked with defeating Amalek, not David HaMelech. David HaMelech doesn't really engage Amalek all that much more Plishtim, without comparison, ironically. And but there is, subduing Amalek. But pretty much by the time you get to David HaMelech's reign, they're subdued. They're gone. They're not the problem. We still have plenty of problems with lots of other people. But point being is that Yosef is the one who takes out the threats of Amalek, mostly. Okay? That's what Zeresh wanted to say. He says, if this guy is not a general Jew, but he's descendant from the house of Saul, which of course he was, royalty mamish, Ishimini, then you got a problem. Because that's the guy which you're going to repeatedly be felled by. What do you mean repeatedly? It's going to repeat again and again. It will repeat again and again. Every time that Amalek falls, it's because of Zara Yosef, which was a general reference to all the tzaddikim and chassidim, the great Anshe Maisa, who were tzaddikim Yesod Olam. Let's put it that way. The great tzaddikim of all time. They have the power to defeat our worst enemies. But in any case, we see that Zeresh was identifying the fact that it was the tribe of Binyamin. And again, I like to associate that with the fact that Hashem associated the state of Israel with the name Binyamin very much, whether it's Binyamin Herzl or Binyamin Netanyahu. The identity of the Jewish of the modern state, call it this Kufa, is predicated on Binyamin. This is a Kufa Binyamin. Certainly is. Okay, but we got to wait for Yehuda. That's coming later. That's going to be when there's complete defeat, when the regime changes. Mashiach will come. And to that end, I'm going to show you an incredible Gemorrah in Avodah Zarah that confirms that exactly. Just give me a moment, please, to get it. Hold on. Okay. The Gemara describes Hashem sitting with the Torah in his lap at the beginning of Masechus Avodah Zarah, Bnei Dehem, and asking those who deserve the reward of Torah to step forward, okay, and you get your reward. This is Beis Amud Beis. Listen to this Gemara. The Gemara says, immediately all the nations gathered, to get the reward. Oh, we helped Torah. We supported Torah. We promoted Torah. We allowed Torah. Yeah, really? So first comes in what the Gemara describes as the most chashuv, the most powerful of all the nations. And as Tosos here points out, there's going to be two primary nations that will be there at the end of days. One is Rome, which is represented by the world of Christianity, by all of our medieval Gedolim since then. So the Christian world, which is led by a Christian named Trump, and Europe, and that aspect of Esav, and Paras, and Iran, and all its Chaverim. Brother, Russia's included in Esav as well. There'll be two primary protagonists in the world. There'll be America, Romy, the Christian world, and there'll be the Muslim world, the Arab world, but not the Arab world, the Persian Muslims, because I believe, and I mentioned this in previous Shiurim, that the authentic Arabs, the real Yishmaelim Arabs, have already surrendered to the Jewish people, starting with Sadat, and that's Mitzrayim is Arabs, Syrians are Arabs, but Jordanians are completely Arab, right? Saudi Arabia, United Arab UAE, Bahrain, the ones who have made peace with the Jewish people. You know, ironically, we have no flights going out of Israel because of the war, except you can go through Jordan or Egypt. What? How can you even understand that? If I would have told you that years ago, you'd say, what are you, crazy? Those are our mortal enemies. And now, yeah, no, if you're Jewish, you just, you might need a little protection over there just from crazies, but yeah, according to the law in the state of Jordan, and actually that's what they'll do. You can get on a plane. You can come from Israel and get on a plane and go back to America. You can take a bus through Sinai and get to Sharm el-Sheikh, which is unfortunately under Egyptian rule, and get a plane back to America. It's crazy. It's proof that they've already been conquered. The Malach of Yishmael, for all intents and purposes, has been conquered, except for the non-Arab Islam. That part of Yishmael has not only have they not been subjugated, but they still actively seek our death and destruction, as Yishmael did in his day against Yitzchak. But the Gemara identifies two nations that will come forward to God. Only two, Rome and Persia. So Tosfos asks, what do you mean? I thought that Rome defeats Persia. This is also Gemara in Shabbos, if you would. And they said, you're right. Yeah, Rome will defeat Persia, but not until Mashiach time. So here you have it. the final regime change and the full defeat of Iran, however long that takes, indicates that we're in Yemos HaMashiach. And how shocking it is that the text, which was written so many hundreds of years ago, what, in the year 300, 400, the Talmud was already ready, was already prepared. Jerusalem Talmud finished in 400. The Babylonian Talmud kept developing, but basically it was in its pretty much in its form now. What, near 500? Now it's 25, 1500 years ago. 1500 years ago, they said that the last two empires standing are going to be Rome and Paris. And listen to what they said. It's even more telling. Amar Rav Yochanan, this is Rome, the most chashuv of all the empires, Christian world. It sets the tone for the world. Everybody follows America, which maybe to a lesser extent they did England, but they follow America. Everybody, the trend, the styles, the fashion, the music, whatever. Maybe more England than music, I'm not sure. The first, most important one goes first. Like Rav Chizda said, if a king is going to be judged with his nation, you send in the king first. And it's not respectful to make him wait. So now what did they say? Rome comes, America comes, England comes, English, the British Mandate. They come and they say, you know what we did? We did great things for the state of Israel, for the Jewish people. Great thing. Oh, yeah, right. Like stopping the ships from the Holocaust survivors and sending them back, putting them in prisons in Cyprus, and all that, and trying to hand the land over lock, stock, and barrel to our Arab enemies. Thank you. But they did do some stuff. He says, we made shvakim. We made market. We brought economy here. We taught Western ways of economy. We paved roads, by the way. There's all kinds of stuff. Merchatzos. We brought hospitals. We brought bathhouses. We promoted public health, public wealth, and public health. These are necessary and vital things. We gathered a lot of money. We brought prosperity. And all of this helped Torah survive and be built. So Hashem says to him, I'm sorry, you didn't do this to help the Jews learn Torah. What you did was you made a shuk, interestingly enough, for prostitution, which shows you that it's not really about money. It's about pleasure seeking. Merchotz Adam Behen, the shvitz, the hot baths to make yourself gorgeous. And Kesef and Zahav really wasn't up to you. You think you made it? You didn't make it. I granted it to you, says Hashem. So get out of here, Rome. Then Persia comes up, and they say something completely different. Rome is pleasure-focused. The Christian world today is all about znus and pleasure and pritzus and doing what you want and having lots of money to do what you want. There's not a lot of, pride going on. There's not a lot of gaiva going on, superiority. No, the universities have become a joke, and for a long time, till Trump came, the army had been turned into a joke. What does motivate the Christian world today is pleasure, physical bodily pleasure, but not so Iran. They're ready to blow up. They're ready to blow up their bodies. Western people don't blow up their bodies. Okay, they say give them more money. Give them a little more money, and they'll realize that just have a good time, Here's some money. But what do they really want? They come forward and they said as follows: Harbe Gisharim Gasharnu. We made bridges to the world. Harbe Krachim Kavashnu. We conquered many, many cities. Conquest. Harbe Milchamos Asinu. We want war. The Persians want war and conquest. It's exactly what they want. They want to conquer the world and turn it into one caliphate. It's 1,500 years ago, and nothing has changed. And not only has it changed, but it's been revealed and confirmed. They want the world. And Christianity says, give them some money. Maybe they'll forget about it. They're not going to forget about it. That's what they want. So Hashem says to them, you know what? You think you did this to help the Jewish people? To make it that there's place you can get here, you can go there. The world will be interconnected, and it'll be easy to live, easy to travel. He said, you know what? I'm not impressed. All you did that was for your own personal gain, right? And you did it for yourself. Gisharim, for what? For money. Money is power. In this context, is power, not pleasure. They want power. The West wants pleasure. Persia wants power. That's why the nuclear plants were their main objective, because it represents power. And to this end, this is just something humorous. If you just think about this, the Russians came the day after Trump destroyed Fordo, or thinks he destroyed Fordo anyway, and says, oh, don't worry, Iran. We have plenty of weapons. We can drop a couple off. And then Pakistan already said that they'll give you one. So ask yourself a question. Why didn't they take the nuclear weapons from Russia and from Pakistan and from North Korea, who want to give it to them, and they didn't use it? It's unbelievable. No, they don't want a weapon. They want to be able to manufacture multiple weapons. That's what they want, because that's real power. Somebody donates a bomb to you, it's like, JNF, please donate bombs. Poor Iran needs a nuclear bomb. Who wants to donate one? Maybe we can sponsor it. We'll put the name on the bomb. They're not interested in that. They're really not interested in that. They want power. They want to control the world. Can't control the world unless you can produce endless amounts of nuclear weapons. It's such a tremendous insight. They could have had 10 bombs. Just send one phone call to Putin. I need it from the Ayatollah. We need a few bombs. It's there. They said so. They don't want it, because then they're not powerful. It's just shocking. It's just shocking how all this goes down. And the prediction in this Tosfos on Beis Amud Beis, on the Daf Yomi, precisely as it came to the hit that Trump delivered, that we were concerned nothing would happen. And then I thought for sure nothing was going to happen because of this 2-week announcement, but it turns out it was a subterfuge. It was a decoy. And here we have it. Now we have to wait for stage 2, which is the fact that the regime will end. Khomeini will be taken away, but not just Khomeini. Khomeini represents an ideology. You can't just look how many people they killed. They killed every single top leader, which is a nes nigla. We have to thank Hashem for every single one of them that was taken out with this brilliance by the Mossad and the army. Kol hakavod. But guess what? There's a million waiting in the wings. It's not a solution. It's a temporary victory, and maybe even a significant victory. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, doubtful. But within a year, they can rebuild and replace pretty much what they have. Same with Gaza. So we can't end the war in Gaza, because the minute you pull out, 10 seconds later, the ideology and the money kick in. They start all over again. It's not a solution. Mashiach will bring the solution. Will bring a final piece. A final piece. So we have to be a little patient. We have to wait. I will say one thing. So now comes the question in my last 5 minutes here is, so what do we do now? We've observed that Hashem sent us messages. What the messages are, he says, look carefully. I'm going to reduce the power of Amalek. It's analogous to sending the 10 plagues, but we're not at Kriyas Yamsuf yet. At Kriyas Yamsuf, power will be completely defeated. The ultimate time, the Ayatollah will be completely defeated. And all their ilk. And all the nations that support them. But we're not there yet, and we have to be patient. Just like in the Megillah, the letters went out in Sivan, June, but nothing really happened until the next Adar. I don't know, I would watch the calendar. Things are going to happen in this interim period, no doubt. There'll be hitkadmut, but sometimes Hashem brings it slowly, and definitely slow, one at a time. Now it's definitely picking up speed, but we have to anticipate that don't be satisfied where we are. Had Klal Yisrael been recaptured by Paro on their way to the Yam Suf, that would have been a disaster. So just because the Makos have been delivered doesn't mean it's a knockout punch. It's going to take a little time. And what do we do in the meantime? How can we help this process along? So again, this week was Parshas Shlach. That was the week that the American attacks took place, and then we have, of course, Parshas Korach coming up this week. In Parshas Shlach, we had the terrible, terrible incident of the spies, which caused Tisha B'Av and destruction and exile to the Jewish people, not only in that generation, but in every generation that we don't merit to have Eretz Yisrael, or that Hashem decreed, for whatever his logic and reasons are, that it's time to end this Malchus Yisrael and begin somewhere else, or from country to country, or whatever it might be, exile from Spain, the Holocaust, World War I started on Tisha B'Av, and all those sad stories. But he did give us a formula of how to repair. And that is, if you go immediately after the story of Meraglim, we get a series of mitzvos that Hashem, I believe, revealed to us. What do we do to get the rest of the way home? What do we need to move from a Tisha B'Av moment, a Meraglim moment, to not only a Purim moment, but a Geula Shlema, a Kriyas Yam Suf moment? So here we go, just very, very quickly. The first mitzvah that Hashem gives after the story of Meraglim is called Nisachim. It says, Kisavo al Aretz, don't worry, you will get Eretz Yisrael. This generation might not, but the next generation will. And you're going to bring individual karbanos. I want you to bring karbanos. Karbanos means to get close. Karev, get close to me. But I'm going to give you a mitzvah to add to it. You're going to have to do Nisachim. Nisachim comprised of gifts of oil mingled into flour for the bread of the Kohanim, and also wine to pour in the Mizbeach. Bread and wine, essentially. Bread for the Kohanim, wine for the Mizbeach. What's going on over here? Why is this the mitzvah that comes right after Meraglim? Okay? So I believe the answer is like this. The Meraglim thought that what was going to go down with the Geula was one of two things. Either Moshe and Hashem are going to do it, and they're going to just go on for the ride, or it's on their shoulders, and they're going to have to do it. Because they had heard that Moshe Rabbeinu was not going to lead them to Eretz Yisrael, and only Yeshua would, who was, not Moshe in their eyes, although he was given power by Moshe to do miraculous things, and he did. Yericho, etc., crossing of the Yarden. Those were the remnants of Moshe, which carried on in the form of Yehoshua for 14 years of the initial conquest. But they didn't quite know that. Yeshua was one of them, Meraglim. And they said, okay, now, Moshe, you're not going to be with us. We got to do this ourselves. We got to prepare. A smart person prepares. Go in, look at the road, take the territory. We're going to have to conquer this. We're going to have to subdue it. We're going to have to plan our economies. We're going to have to create safe zones, etc. Prosperity zones. Let us take a look. Let's start preparing. It was perfectly legitimate. But what they didn't realize was that it wasn't on them at all. There was going to be a shiluv. There was going to be super miraculous laid onto the regular efforts of Klal Yisrael. What we call a miraculous hashgacha pratis, what the Ramban used to call hidden miracles, and even many open miracles, were going to accompany you. All right, you're not going to have the ananei kavod. No. You're not going to have 7 clouds protecting every step of yours from the midbar like you had. You're not going to eat the man. You're going to have to go out and be motzi lechem and arts. You're going to have to pick your grapes and make your own wine. But guess what? You'll be able to do it. Why? Because you'll be connected to me. Hence, the mitzvah of nisachim, of lechem and yayin and shemen, which of course is necessary for health, for drinking, for lighting the darkness. If you want Eretz Yisrael and you want to succeed in those areas, come closer to me. Bring a korban to me. A reach nichoach. Let's get along. It's almost like Allah havdil, a million havdalos. Hashem says to Klal Yisrael, let's go out for dinner. You bring the wine and the bread, and and we'll talk, and we'll get close, and we'll start a loving conversation. Hashem says, I need a loving conversation. The answer is not all me or all you. That is isolation. That is separation. That is depression. That is oppression. We need to keep it together. And therefore, the Torah goes through a series of mitzvahs. Can't go into all right now. We have to stop. But final one being tzitzis, where we literally bind we take our bodies and we blanket it with the commitment to do Torah mitzvahs. You're going to go that way, which is why it's so important that the chayalim wear tzitzis, and as Lubavitcher pointed out, tefillin, which is of course the love story between Hashem and Klal Yisrael. Hashem has tefillin, we have tefillin. Just bind yourself to me, and we need to bind ourselves closer to Hashem now, if we are to legitimately claim that we're ready for the next step. How do you do that? We're going to have to volunteer, take a vow. What does that mean? Initiate conversation, initiate dedication, start talking to Hashem in your own words every single day. Pour out your life to Him, what's going on, your prayers, but lots and lots of thank yous. We're going to have a special thank you share for all the things that has gone down in this calendar year, this Jewish calendar year, which are mind-boggling. And then we'll be able to see that we can commit to more close observance of Torah mitzvahs. Well, let's get the halacha here. Let's keep Shabbos properly. Let's take everything seriously, our tefillos seriously. Let's get ready. Not in the sense of everybody be from. No. Everybody be happy from. I want you to be happy from. What's happy from? You feel kesher to Hashem. If you're doing mitzvahs and you feel no kesher, it's all Him or all you, that's torture. It's torturous. Hashem allow us to do the mitzvahs b'simcha. And that's really getting ready. So I wish everybody a wonderful week. I hope we'll see progress towards our destination. I hope this maps out a schema to know that we've got a road ahead of us. But b'simcha and with yayin and lechem, we're going to celebrate together with Hashem, together with Israel. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Shir Chadash